long time ago in a galaxy far, far... Wait a minute. What's this, folks? There are more galaxies that we're going to adventure through with Star Sort of Wars. That's right, folks. Star Wars is branching out, going to places that characters have never gone before. We're going to find out, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's coming to Ahsoka, and it may portend far more changes in the future. Let's dive into the latest out of Lucasfilm right now. All right, folks, welcome back to another video here on the WDW Pro channel. Thank you so much for clicking upon it. We're excited to share with you the information you need to have entertainment explained and keep you ahead of the culture curve. Helping us do so is Lauren Cotter of ThatPartPlace.com. Lauren is quite the aficionado when it comes to all things Star Wars lore, and I think he's one of the best on the planet. Lauren, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Lauren, in the latest episode of Ahsoka, and perhaps even the earlier episodes, we're sort of on the cusp of perhaps going to a new galaxy. We're leaving the old galaxy behind. We're gonna get out of here. We're leaving it. It's a mess. Some people say it's a dumpster fire. So, Lauren, tell us, though, realistically, why are we actually leaving the galaxy and going to a new galaxy in Star Wars?
Well, I think the most obvious reason is because anything that they do in the existing galaxy is just going to further upset the fans who don't want them to continue to make changes there. So if they go to a new galaxy, that's a fresh slate for them to play with, and it gives them some tools that they can kind of subtly retcon back into the continuity. They've had a real problem with creating villains because they sort of killed off the main villains of Star Wars in a couple of different ways. In the new galaxy, I think they're going to find that that's going to be the origin point for one of those groups, and so it allows them to reintroduce a villain group that is pretty popular with the fan base.
All right, so Lauren, talk us through, why do we think they're actually going to go to a new galaxy in this Ahsoka series?
Well, the evidence is there in the episodes that we've seen so far, is that they are tracking the Purrgil to go to this place called the Pathway to Peridea.
Whoa, now wait a minute. For those who are not knowledgeable, what is the majestic Purrgil, please?
It is a space whale with hyperspace capabilities.
Sounds like a very exciting car, perhaps. Maybe a SUV. I'm not sure about this. But it's an actual organic creature, right?
It is.
Okay, and we're following the space whales to a new galaxy.
Yep. And the previous episodes had called this new mysterious location the Pathway to Peridea. And that could mean lots of different things. The intimation has been made that this is potentially where the Night Sisters originally came from. I think the big thing here is that it does give them a clean slate. There could be anything at the other end of this, and I've heard some very interesting speculation from other people of where they think that this could potentially go. I think the benefit that you have here is that you could have a truly alien galaxy that we don't know anything about, really. You can resurrect a villain group that had previously been thought to be mostly extinct, and that gives you back another adversary that is like the Sith, adjacent to the Sith. It is another Force tradition, and that gives you the possibility of introducing even more Force-related groups that could be interesting foils or allies for whatever they want to do.
So tell us who these Night Sisters are. What are we talking about here?
So in the old EU, one of the first books that came out after the original Thrawn trilogy, you had The Truce at Bakura, and then you had The Courtship of Princess Leia, that was written by Dave Wolverton. And that was where the planet Dathomir was introduced, and that also introduced this group of what were called Sith witches, called the Night Sisters. In The Courtship of Princess Leia, the idea was that they were sort of quarantined on that world by the Emperor. He feared their ability to escape that planet. They were quite different than what was presented of them when they eventually made their way into the Clone Wars, but in the Clone Wars, it was shown that they were not strictly limited to that world. They did have space travel. They were not Sith, they used different abilities, a sort of force magic that was somewhat adjacent to Sith alchemy. And so they were not Sith, but they were sort of adjacent to the Sith. And my guess is that that's what they're going to be exploring on that other side of the galaxy. And this ties into some other rumors that have come out about the next show that's going to be in line, which is Skeleton Crew. I believe it was Doomcock, although I could be wrong about this, who had broken a lot of rumors that were about that show, and they seem to be lining up pretty well with the breadcrumbs that have been laid in Ahsoka. And so I think in a lot of ways, Ahsoka may just be the prequel to whatever they want Skeleton Crew to be. They're kind of falling into that Marvel path where every single episode is just sort of a trailer for the next one.
Okay, so let's talk about then. It seems to me to be on the verge of too convoluted for average fans to follow. Let me explain why. We're going to do the Acolyte next year, and the Acolyte takes place during the High Republic. We've been doing the Mandoverse, which takes place during the New Republic. The sequel trilogy takes place during the First Order. The original trilogy and the prequels take place in their own eras. But there's also other eras that we have not explored yet in Disney content, but which have been explored in the past. Now we're going to a new galaxy. This timeline seems to me to be a little stretched thin at this point. And one of the issues, Lauren, is that, I did a video last week where we talked about what really killed Star Wars, what really killed The Mandalorian. And that was one of the best received videos we've ever done on the channel. Not to toot my own horn, but simply to say, you have to pay attention to the audience. When the like to dislike ratio reaches that level, you say, okay, well, something is happening here. We've hit the right nerve. We've played the right key. Lauren, I don't know that all of these different timelines do anything to solve the problem of we hit that brick wall narratively with the end of the sequel trilogy, with the desecration of the character of Luke, with the usurping of the Skywalker family with the Palpatines. Rey is a Palpatine. She takes the name. I've compared her to Goldilocks, who evicts the bears, and the bears are supposed to be in their house, right? So do you feel that this is a good narrative choice to kind of take Star Wars in a new galaxy and get away from the old? Or do you think that this is just another layer when we need real bandages to fix the wound?
I got into a conversation on Twitter with some folks earlier this week that was having this very discussion. And what I would say is, no, this is not going to fix Star Wars and all of their woes. It's not going to bring the fan base back that left after the sequel trilogy. Not at all. It's not going to help them ascend to the heights that they once occupied. On the other hand, it may be the best move for Disney to try and stop the bleeding, at least to a certain point, if they absolutely refuse to do away with the sequel trilogy. It does give them an opportunity to play on a clean slate where, because it's in a cordoned off part of the universe, it's its own separate galaxy, it makes it kind of hard to continue to damage what happened in the old galaxy. Will that go to their benefit to any great degree? You'd have to. It all depends on what the storytelling is. I could technically argue it from both sides, because you're right in that there is so much weight of continuity, both legends that's been discarded and what's existed before. Everything has always been released out of order. They've never released anything chronologically. And there's all these different factions and places. A casual fan could never keep up with it. But the same thing is true of the original movie, A New Hope. You just get dropped into the middle of the action, and very little is explained at first. There's one great expository dialogue scene when Obi-Wan kind of explains to Luke who the Jedi are, what the Empire is, and a little bit of what had gone before, to give you something to anchor off of. But that movie worked, because through context, you got everything that you needed. One thing that could be interesting about going off to this new galaxy is that you can now have new factions that you don't know anything about. It means that you don't really know who your allies could potentially be. You don't know who your adversaries are. You don't know how they interrelate with other factions that are also in that place. So it can be an interesting playground with a lot of misdirection. It means that you don't necessarily know what the stakes are. You don't know how your presence in that area is going to affect whatever the political balances are. So there's stakes now potentially reintroduced. But then you have to ask the question, if it's a separate galaxy with new characters, with new factions that have nothing to do with the original ones, is it still Star Wars?
Right, new ships, new everything, right? If you lose all of the things that made it Star Wars, you would assume, well,
It, it's the
it
ship.
feels,
It's the ship enthusiast.
yes, well, it feels a bit like if you said, hey, to borrow from that video we did last week, feels like taking Batman and saying, well, what if we got out of Gotham? What if we took a different superhero and let's go somewhere else for a while? And it's like, well, if you take a different superhero and you go to a different city, it's not really Batman anymore, is it? But Lauren, I'll give you another analogy. You tell me if I'm wrong on this. It sort of feels like if you're a surgeon and you cause your patient to go into cardiac arrest, and then your solution is, well, why don't we work on the leg for a little bit? It's like, no, I think we have a bigger problem over here. I'm not sure going to the leg is going to suffice, but I don't know. I don't think that Star Wars can ever be healed until they accept and get around this issue that they killed the character or the characters of their most popular characters. So,
Yeah,
just my
I
thought.
I agree. I don't think that they can ever truly restore Star Wars to where it was. Even if they tried to do away with the sequel trilogy at this point, I don't think the original fan base is coming back. I don't think there's anything that you could do at this point. It's just too badly damaged. They may be able to continue to exist as a more niche property, but even that, I think the cost to continue to make these things would outweigh any potential benefit that they could get from continuing on. I think they're just in real trouble.
Do you think that any of this that we're watching leads up to the Rey movie, or do you think that Filoni is jumping ship and jumping galaxies?
Um, it's real difficult to say. A lot depends upon the leadership at Disney and what they are looking at. Lucasfilm is ultimately a small part of the Disney empire, and they have very big fires to try and put out. That doesn't mean that Lucasfilm isn't important or that Star Wars isn't important, but I'm not sure if it's enough to move the needle on something that they've already committed to and seem hell bent on maintaining. So I guess that I would say they're probably still at least exploring pre-production on the Ray movie. Whether they commit to actually going to production may be a different question.
Well,
One
now
thing
we
that it
see what this
does
strike does. I mean, who knows when this strike ends?
One thing that does help with going to another galaxy and introducing everybody to what all of that is that it buys you time. It lets you tread water for a while you're checking to see, does anybody bite on this hook? Are people responding to this? And it gives you time to plan for, what do we do if this doesn't work? Uh, I would hope by now they would sort of know that they should have been planning for this for a very long time, because nothing's been working for years. But it's the old story, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. It's eventually going to have to decide what it's going to do on its own. So
Well, in the list of failures and potential pitfalls that Star Wars could do, I have to say that the multiple galaxy concept really falls into that same erroneous idea that Marvel has with the multiverse. And that is that when you have multiple galaxies, you can do an infinite number of galaxies. That lowers the stakes tremendously. You already had so many planets in the galaxy in which we were, visiting for the last decades. You had so many places unexplored, of course, and to open it up to a new galaxy, I think, can greatly damage the tension that should be there, but which is not. So, any thoughts on that?
this is one of the issues that caused me to roll my eyes when they first talked about leaving the galaxy, because and I'm going to get myself a little bit in trouble here, because my having reviewed some of this material is probably decades back now. So I'm trying to go from memory here. Go easy on me. Um, if we're talking about strictly movie and TV continuity, there's no problem there. But if you're talking about from the old EU, different sources said different things about travel outside of the Star Wars galaxy. And there are other YouTube channels that have talked about the horrors that are outside of the Star Wars galaxy. But
Our galaxy. Do,
my
do,
re-
do.
my recollection, and again, this may be wrong, so take it with a grain of salt, is that in a lot of the old EU sources, travel outside the Star Wars galaxy was not possible. In the Thrawn novels, a major point of those was the Outbound Flight Project, which was in the waning days of the Republic, a Jedi Master sponsored by the Emperor put together an expedition of some Jedi to take a special craft called the Outbound Flight Project into the unknown regions of the galaxy, trying to reach what would equate to the galactic edge. They never made it. They were looking for other life and to find out if there was anything outside the galaxy. They actually encountered Grand Admiral Thrawn before he became Grand Admiral Thrawn, and the expedition was destroyed. Other sources have indicated that as you get closer to the galactic rim, that the gravitational forces and other natural phenomena there are so turbulent that they'll simply rip your ship apart. Now, what makes this interesting is when you start talking about the new Jedi Order, because in that series of novels, you did have extragalactic invaders come into the Star Wars universe. And so the inference that I always made was that from within the Star Wars galaxy, you could not get out. But that didn't mean that things from outside the galaxy could not come in. And the Yuuzhan Vong, which were those invaders that came in from the outside, a characteristic that was interesting about them was that they appeared to be immune to the Force. And I think that that said something interesting about what makes the Star Wars galaxy special, which is that that seems to be where the Force is generated. And it was a source of some mystery to the Jedi as to how the Yuuzhan Vong could be alive and yet devoid of the Force. So there's questions there from the old EU continuity that kind of brush up against this potential idea of leaving the Star Wars galaxy, but all of that's been relegated to legends anyway. So, depending on how you look at it, it may or may not matter depending on how you feel.
I see a
Now,
strong parallel with reality, though, Lorne. We too have seen that Lucasfilm is devoid of the Force as of late, and we too are amazed that it continues to exist without it. We have no idea how this works.
there is actually one other theory that I've seen some other channels talking about, and that specifically involved the Purrgil. And if they can leave the Star Wars galaxy and come back in and travel via hyperspace, that's very similar to some of the bioorganic craft that the Yuuzhan Vong used in their transit through the galaxy. Those extragalactic invaders didn't have technology the way that we would think of it. All of their technology was based on bioorganisms. So they could potentially try and lead into that storyline a little bit. They may be robbing a bit from there, but if they do, it'll be with their own Disney spin on it. I don't think that they would go anywhere near as dark as the new Jedi Order did.
So Thrawn, we assume, is from the Star Wars galaxy, has exited the Star Wars galaxy, again, we presume. And, well, for our heroes apparently to have any kind of threat and to follow through on the Thrawn storyline, at least partially, they have to come back in the galaxy again. So lots of traveling there between galaxies. But, Lauren, how are they going to retrofit Thrawn and the story of Thrawn that was done by Timothy Zahn? How are they going to retrofit that without using the characters that were originally part of that story? How do they put these Disney Dave Filoni characters into that place? I don't understand exactly what the plan is here.
I don't think it's really going to be a Thrawn retelling. I think they're just using the character of Thrawn and some of his characteristics and telling a new story that may brush on some similar concepts, but probably not adapting the original Thrawn trilogy in any other way. The one thing that I think will probably be addressed is Thrawn's need for a fleet. And we kind of touched on that in our last video. If they have him in this unknown galaxy with something that is the Disney equivalent of the Star Forge from the old Republic games, then that could explain both how he has a fighting force at his command that he's now crewing with people from this other distant galaxy, and potentially also explain how the resurrected emperor in the sequel trilogy manages to get his fleet and have an infinite supply of resources.
Well said. And best they leave all of that alone. I would say they're not going to find any solace in any kind of retrofitting, any kind of explanations as to how the rise of Palpatine came to be. Lauren, any chance, and this is our final question on the topic, but any chance that this multi-galaxy solution that they're coming up with could also be a way to separate out the sequel trilogy from everything else and say, oh, well, that was in a mirrored galaxy or a multiversal kind of thing? Anything with the world between worlds, and is there any out for Disney at this point?
There's always the possibility of an out. In that conversation that I mentioned earlier that I had with that other fellow on Twitter, my position is that a competent writer can get you out of anything. Think of all of the action movies you've ever watched, everything where you get a hint of where a storyline is going to go, and you may hear rumors about what's going to be, and you say to yourself, oh, that's stupid. Why would they do that? And then you see it on a show or in a theater, and somehow they manage to make it plausible in the moment. It's cool, you like it, and you just roll with it. If you're working with the audience, they'll go with you as long as you're not insulting their intelligence, a lot of times, I think. But the time to have done that was quite a bit before now. The world between worlds is technically still on the table, and if it's going to be anywhere, it would probably be in the Ahsoka series. Would they use it to retcon the sequels? I wouldn't bet any amount of money on
No,
that.
no, no. I'm talking about when we get 10 years down the road, if Star Wars is still going, if Kathleen Kennedy is gone, if there's somebody competent at Lucasfilm, like, how do we get out of this situation? Because, Lauren, think about it this way. Let's go back to Batman again, okay? Let's say there's a really terrible Batman story. You just throw it away, and you do another storyline, and that exists still, but it's like, it's not really real Batman anymore. We did this other thing. Star Wars can't really do that because you took the canon of the major films. You took the last chance to have those characters put together with the original actors, and you just did the worst possible job that could be done. Like, you could not have sat down and game planned out any better how to make that awful. And I don't know how you get around it even 10 years down the road.
No, I mean, if they were going to try and do something like that, the the best case scenario is that I'm taking the example as though Lucasfilm were sold. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that's the easiest way that you can wrap your head around the idea of retconning the sequels, however you do that. So a new owner comes in, a new leader, whatever you want to call it. The best way that they could deal with this is just say, we're going to start over the continuity from this point, which would be immediately post Return of the Jedi. And then we're going to build forward from there. Whatever we had before, just forget about that. That'll be relegated to new legends or whatever you want to call it. I think it would be a mistake to try and integrate everything that they've done and then do a soft reboot, because at a certain point it's already so convoluted for
That's
for a
right. Yeah,
casual
exactly.
for a casual fan. There is 40 years of material here, and it would be impossible to absorb it all. Um, Trying to weave that in and out of the mistakes that they've already made, it would just be a disaster. And the longer they let this go, the more the damage festers. And that's part of the problem. It's why it would behoove them to figure out what they're doing now instead of continuing to kick the can down the road. My guess is that what they're working on, because they keep trying to build it out and do something that the audience has explicitly rejected, it's not going to work. It doesn't matter what stories you tell at this point. People don't buy the premise it's built on. So I think it's effectively dead.
Well, just think about it this way. If you are a casual fan of Star Wars, there is no way that you have any idea when you're watching a show if it takes place in the Old Republic, if it takes place in the New Republic, the High Republic, if it takes place, in the New Order. Like nobody, these casual fans come into these shows and they don't know how this is connected with Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader, or they don't get it.
They do have a built-in mechanism to deal with that, though, and a lot of that is because these are built on the bones of the old movie serials from the 30s and 40s. In those days, people would come in and you would have these cliffhanger shorts, and you may not have seen the previous weeks or even the previous 3 weeks, but you always got a little primer at the very beginning that put you right in the middle of the action, and you could just pick up and go. For casual viewers, I think there's a lot of people that never know where anything in the continuity is.
It's a great point, actually.
I remember when the prequels came out that I had seen The Phantom Menace a few times, and I was going to see another movie, and I heard these people sitting in the seats behind me, and I heard them talking, and they were talking about The Phantom Menace because it was still kind of new in the theaters, and the fellow who was speaking was talking about that very thing. He thought that this was supposed to be post Return of the Jedi, and he said that he was very confused for a while until he figured out that this was actually taking place before the original movies. And then he leaned over to the person next to him and he said, "But I'll tell you something. I think there's something shady about that Palpatine character." so
what better could be said than he's a little bit shady?
Yeah, I had to laugh a little bit, but keep it to myself, because I didn't want to get caught eavesdropping on the guy. But it's like, boy, let me tell you, buddy, you don't know the half of it.
That poor guy, he never knew that his quote would be coming back 24 years later in a video for thousands and thousands of people to hear about. But I have to say, that should be on a shirt. That Palpatine fellow's a little shady.
I thought it was funny.
Oh, well, Lauren, thank you for being here and walking us through this multi-galaxy situation now with Star Wars. We'll see how it goes. Of course, folks, we also realize that Star Wars is going to face what could be potent competition. We'll see what goes on with Rebel Moon over on Netflix. We're going to have some coverage of that coming out very soon. We are hearing that Netflix thinks they have the Star Wars killer. But Lauren, you and I talked before the show. What did you say when I told you that?
Well, it's like, I think if you were going to brag about that kind of thing, it probably should have been 3 or 4 years ago. You're giving a lot of undue credit to Rebel Moon. I think the job's pretty much already done.
It's like leapfrogging a paralyzed man. All right, folks. Well, the conversation here has come to a close, but the commentary begins. We would love to read your comments. It's time to dissect everything that's been said here. So all of you Star Wars gurus out there, you aficionados, drop down what you think about what has been spoken. Are we right? Are we wrong? What do we not know? What are we missing? And what should we know about those beautiful, wonderful Purrgil? Also, folks, if you wouldn't mind, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It's the notification bell. You can find Lorne Connor by going into the video description and clicking the link to Lorne Connor, and you'll find out that he has a wonderful YouTube channel. He's also an author over at thatparkplace.com. Make sure you check it out and bookmark that site. We are about to lift that thing up with a brand new That Park Place YouTube channel, which will be fully integrated and which will bring forth many of your favorite content creators all together into a That Park Place news network. You do not want to miss it. All right, folks, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Oh.
What are you doing?
Well, you see, I wanted to get some inside scoops on Disney and their different corporations, if you know what I mean. So I figured by looking into this fistbowl and sucking it randomly with my own energy that I pay for, you paid for, I could do the whole experience where you can be a master and spy on your targets.
You're an idiot. If you want to get the inside scoop on Disney, or even other media organizations, you should check out thatparkplace.com and subscribe to WDW Pro's YouTube channel. That'd be way easier, more accurate, and, less dumb.
Are you saying I won't get accurate information this way?
No, you can't.
Who'd have think?